So this was supposed to be a live broadcast, but we ran into many technical issues, and the last of them was the audio. And we've already apologized for that, but I apologize again for any inconvenience caused due to our shortcomings from our side. Really sorry about that, but this interview now we've recorded and we are going to publish it on YouTube. So this is about the what happened in Goa recently, where in a speech at the International Film Festival of India, uh, the head of the jury, an Israeli filmmaker, Nadav Lapid, called the Kashmir Files a propaganda movie. The event is jointly organized by the Government of India, the state government of Goa, and some other organizations. And as expected, the statement went viral on social media. And like any other controversy, it polarized the opinion along two predictable camps, one condemning the statement and the other endorsing it. The cacophony that followed reminded me of another Bollywood movie, Peoply Live, which depicts how the media and politicians feed on controversies while conveniently sidelining the real issue at hand and ignoring the real victims. Just like Peoply Live, here too you had international journalists, actors, influencers, academics, politicians, and other assorted secularists spit on our faces by declaring the accurate depiction of sufferings of Kashmiri Hindus in the movie as propaganda. Now, no one is saying that you have to like the movie at any cost. You may have a negative take on any aspect of the film, its screenplay, its direction, the actors, the background music, whatever. But to deny the dark reality of Hindu genocide that the movie strives to capture takes a special kind of evil. Of course, all those who are indulging in this negationism are adding the disclaimer that, oh, we stand in solidarity with the Kashmiri Hindu victims because of obviously the pressure of being politically correct. But by saying that the film is propaganda, they are doing exactly the opposite and virtually taking a piss on the memories of those who were killed, raped, tortured, or forcibly driven out. They laugh at us and they gleefully put salt on our wounds. Because actually, the movie only shows a fraction of what we went through. Vivek Agnihotri could not possibly have shown each of the 700 individual cases that he has painstakingly documented. And I don't even know if my own grandmother, the first Hindu victim of a bomb blast in Kashmir, figures in this list. She didn't die of a bomb blast. She was killed by the staff of Sher-e-Kashmir Institute of Medical Sciences, who denied her critical care by refusing to admit her just because she was a Hindu. And according to the majoritarian religious belief, she deserved to die because she was an idol worshipper. So there was no other reason for her untimely demise. But all said and done, I wouldn't blame the Israeli head of the jury who made that statement in Goa. He's, after all, a repeat offender, a far left loony who routinely takes a dig at his own people. The blame goes to the government of India, fair and square, for the negligence in appointing key personnel at the event, and when things went south, pretending as if nothing happened. Imagine the Israeli envoy is more embarrassed about what happened than our own government, which has maintained a stoic silence going against its own glorious tradition of Kadi Ninda. In India, you can say anything against the Hindus and get away with it because the government allows people to get away with it. Whether it is famous journalists like Barkhadat spinning stories to justify the atrocities meted out on Kashmiri Hindus, or actors like Swara Bhaskar labeling our lived history of 600 years under Islamic tyranny as Hindutva fiction. So it is the government of India that is to blame because they have a long history of denial of Hindu genocide. And this is a rather minor lapse in their history of blunders. For 32 years and counting, the government has worked tirelessly with the media, the academia, film industry, and NGOs to obfuscate the reality of Kashmir by shifting the blame on Pakistan and giving the locals of Kashmir a free pass. They have made it about employment, misguided youth, uh, for foreign intervention, historical oppression, and what have you. But not once have they officially recognized that Kashmiri Hindus were killed, tortured, raped, or thrown out of the valley because they refused to convert to Islam. The statement by a random foreigner is just the tip of the iceberg. So uh, that is that would be my initial remarks on this. Do you have anything to add, Adarsh?
As you rightly pointed out, that the comment made by this person, uh, it was insensitive, and it wasn't unexpected, since he has been a repeat offender, and we all know that what is the mainstream view of the Kashmiri Pandit genocide. Given that the left has been denying it for since 1990s, they have never covered it, they denied it, and they even made a propaganda film that actually uh, I'm sorry, brushes the genocide. But the point is that why such a thing, that often right wing says that why such a thing doesn't happen to a Schindler's List, or say an out and out propaganda, or not propaganda but just a fun movie like Inglorious Bastards. Why something like that doesn't happen to them? Because at the end of the day, they are just banking on the suffering of the Jews that happened in the 1940s. Because the point is that the Jewish state, or at least the Jewish people across the globe, have made this thing that they have institutionalized this Holocaust of theirs. Nobody can deny it. Denying it will lead one to the bars, behind the bars. Therefore, I think that since the right wing is happy, like at least the mainstream right wing is just happy that there is a film, but there is no institutional action on that. Given that the government has still not acknowledged the genocide, the reasons behind the genocide, that is clearly religion. For the last 1,000 years, the two religions have been at war, if we can say that. There were period of relative calm and peace, not denying that, but the two religions are at loggerhead, and even till now, we have seen that recent killings that has happened in Kashmir Valley. Well, that's not a like a large scale genocide, but still the trigger point is the same. Therefore, since the government, and in after this comment, the comment of this Israeli filmmaker, even then there has been no reaction from the government. That itself says that the government is pretty clueless as to what should they say, because of course this filmmaker is still come from a community which has undergone genocide, so they cannot say, oh, had you faced something like that, you would have said so. So in this moment they have nothing to say.
Correct, correct. That's a very important point that you've touched on. And I believe that Hindus are essentially a stateless people. Because in the modern world, if you don't have a state representing your interests, then you are practically orphans. So, collectively speaking, Hindus are orphans because our interests are not looked after by any state, and the Indian state has repeatedly betrayed us. And when you say that a lot of Hindus themselves do get angry and they take offense if you make such a claim because they believe they've been sort of indoctrinated into this notion of nationalism, which is not problematic for us. I believe that nationalism is a great ideal to pursue, but there has to be some realism when you talk about these things, right? Nationalism is all right, patriotism is all right, but what is it that as a community, what are our interests, who is looking out for them, and do we have a say in important matters internationally? Is there a perspective, a Hindu perspective, that is being broadcasted and or represented when the Indian envoys or the Indian representatives meet in international forums? So there is nothing of that sort happening, and
But that is the main question, that the population of Hindus, it's somewhere around more than 1 billion, and yet they are not able to assert their influence in any sphere, like specifically when it comes to their own personal safety or the historical traumas that they have underwent. Why is that? Like,
no, that is, I mean, we go back to the same point actually, that if you don't have institutions representing you, and the most powerful of all institutions in the modern world is the state, and if you have no state representing you, then the least that you can do is to have alternative institutions outside of the state. Think tanks and some influence in the academia, and that kind of the intellectual capital that you create within the academia, then it trickles down to the media and pop culture, and then there is this whole game of narratives being played today, right, in the modern world, in the age of mass media and information technology.
Can we say that Kashmiri Pandit genocide, sorry, the Kashmir Files, the film, is like the step that it delved into pop culture by the film, but rather the work behind it has not been done yet, at least.
Yes, I do think that is correct, and nothing. I mean, I'm not saying anything to take away from the efforts of Vivek Agnihotri. He did a phenomenal job with telling the truth in the movie. But if you go to a research website like JSTOR, for example, and you type in Kashmir in the search bar, the results that you will get, all the papers, all the academic work that has gone on is from a Muslim point of view. And there are hundreds of papers literally which will allege that India has committed atrocities in Kashmir against the majority population, and you will not find anything.
Like, it's reflective in government policies as well.
Exactly. So, one, the state is not bothered. Second, Hindus do not have institutions that would take up that role in the absence of government support. Right? So even conservatives outside, they have their own institutions, and it's not that they don't have state influence. You can always argue that with this woke movement and all that the left is dominating globally, but the conservatives do have a say in policy affairs. You take the case of abortion rights in United States. The Supreme Court overturned that judgment, and they reinstated the right of the fetus, which is basically a conservative view. Here, too, that discussion has never happened only. You see, among Hindus, there is this vague notion that, oh, anything goes. सब ठीक है, मतलब हमारे तो ऐसा है, whatever your conscience tells. ऐसा तो है नहीं. No religion can survive like that. No value system can be based on whims and fancies. And this is a point which is so easy to understand, yet it is so difficult to explain to fellow Hindus that this is not how it is. I mean, you have an epistemological framework according to which you work, and if that is not there, if you don't recognize that, then you are being incoherent.
But there's a conversation among Hindus as well that how can you expect the entire Hindu society to work in one line when the Kashmiri Pandit community, which has actually suffered, which is a micro minority, there's no consensus within them on many things.
There is no consensus between any community on anything, right? Even if you look at, let's say the Muslim community or the Christian community, even there they don't have consensus. You have the Shia Waqf board saying things which do not, which are not endorsed by the Sunnis, and likewise you have the Bohris, you have the Ahmadiyas, and all kinds of sects are there, and they have their own interest to follow. And suddenly you will have the chief of the Shia Waqf board, he became a Hindu. So it's not that Muslims, you don't have to lionize another community and say that, oh, they are the ideal. They have the same problems, but they have institutional support where they amplify a certain strand of voice, and that gets mainstream, that becomes the main view. In the case of Hindus, it's a cacophony. There is no way in which you can say that, okay, among the spectrum of opinion expressed by Hindus, this is valid, this is coherent, this is based on some research, and this is based on some intellectual intellectual capital. There is nothing like that. So that is why ultimately Hindus are accused of not having unity, while the fact is that human beings are not supposed to live like, automatons where everyone will agree with each other.
Since you pointed out the institutions that are there in, say, religions like Islam, so Hindus would say that if we replicate the same, wouldn't that be leading to the dominance of the regressive orthodoxy within Hinduism itself?
I don't get the question.
The dominance of regressive orthodoxy, since you are talking about institutions like Islam has the institutions, that is the ulema, Maulana, and this nexus.
Well, like I said, I mean, orthodoxy or orthopraxy, I mean, these are different discussions to be had, but largely speaking, I mean, broadly speaking, if you don't have a framework according to which you think and you communicate with each other, you don't have the common currency and a common value system, then nothing will work. So what you lack is not unity, but what you lack is a common vocabulary. And because Hindus, when they speak to each other, they speak based on whims. For example, like I just quoted this debate on abortion. You go to Twitter, the so-called right wing, they'll have all shades of opinion on that, and everyone will assert that theirs is the correct opinion. But the fact of the matter is that for getting that stamp of authority, that this is what the Hindu view is, then you'll have to refer to the Shastras, and you'll have to refer to Dharma Gurus who are experts in those. But those institutions are also in shambles, right? Over the period of centuries, they don't have the same authority and the same hold on Hindu imagination anymore in modern times. So it's a systemic problem that.
Why I pointed out is that because in case of Kashmiri Pandits, there is a accusation that is leveled against them, that due to their orthodox beliefs, they didn't let Muslims revert back to the faith, the Hindu faith, and that's what led to their being a micro minority and eventually wiped out from the
Yeah,
value.
first of all, these are all based on speculations. Even if there is some historical evidence in secondary sources or even in primary sources that such and such thing happened, these things have not been contextualized. And I don't see any problem in an event like that where people would refuse to take back converts to another religion. Like, for example, let's say in the Noakhali massacres. After that, a bunch of Hindus had gotten forcibly converted. And when the riots, or not the riots, but when the massacre was over, they expressed a wish to go, घर वापसी के लिए. So they wanted to reconvert back to Hinduism. And the most traditionalist of acharyas, Dharma Samrat Karpatri Maharaj, he facilitated their return. And he said that, this conversion out of the Hindu fold was because of force, and because these guys had no other choice. So it is not valid at all, and let's get them back. So that is the most traditionalist of acharyas. But in case of Kashmiri Pandits, over the course of centuries, several communities had not converted just out of oppression, but also out of convenience, right? So if you are, for example, if there is a imposition of jizya, and some communities decide that we will save some money and get converted, and then when the things turn, when Dogra rule comes, then they say we'll get back. Obviously, you will have resistance. People will say that no, this is not. How can we accept you back when you didn't stand by dharma at the time when it was required, and now you want to get back because there's a Hindu king? So these are nuances that one has to look into for each case. Otherwise, even in the history of Kashmir, there has been, we've done a video also on Upward where we've talked about people reconverting back to Hindu fold and those movements going on, and that the leaders of that movement paid a heavy price because they got massacred by Sikandar Butchika. So it's not that reconversion was never allowed, but there are contexts. You can allow it in a certain context, and in another case, it is not advisable.
The question of unity among Kashmiri Pandits, this often comes back again and again, is because they say that in the 1980s, Kashmiri Pandits were at top of bureaucracy, yet they didn't do anything to save their own community. So they say that eventually this shows the character that the community lacks inherent unity or kind of a brotherhood. That's why they are suffering.
So that unity, I think, as far as Kashmiri Pandits are concerned, the cohesiveness of the community and the feeling of community, that was very well preserved in Kashmir because we were cut off, because it was not the information age, and Kashmir was an isolated piece of land. We were in a minority, so we were we stuck together with each other. So that is historically attested. There is no doubt about it, and there are lessons that other Hindu communities from the rest of India can learn from Kashmiri Hindus on how to stick together under exploitative, oppressive conditions where you are outnumbered so thoroughly. So there is no, that kind of argument basically betrays a lack of understanding of realities of Kashmir. Unity, I've already mentioned that unity is a bogus idea. This unity kuch nahi hota. As far as I understand, of course people can disagree, but for me, unity means nothing at all. The fact that there were bureaucrats or ikka dukka log idhar udhar kahin government mein the, that means nothing. Today the government is headed by great Hindus, yet nothing is being done at the national level. You had the case of Nupur Sharma, where she just said something and then she was thrown under the bus. You had the case of Bengali Hindus after the Bengal elections. So these are all, it is the same case. You have Hindus representing Hindus in the government, in the West Bengal government, in the central government also. You have the case of Anurag Podar, who was killed, was shot in the head. Poor guy, 18-year-old, 19-year-old guy. So what did the Hindu representatives do in Bihar state government? So these are meaningless things. There is a tendency, and it's basic human nature, that when you are defeated and when you feel that you are not going to achieve anything and not going to get close to victory, you tend to blame each other. So that's what Hindus do all the time.
Coming back to Kashmir Files, a much needed film, but there's one problem with that film that I personally feel is that it somehow shows that the Article 370 was a kind of a reason why Kashmiri Pandits had to leave the valley, or somewhere like the abolition of Article 370 was the biggest step that it has solved a lot of things, which is not the case. Personally, it is just what I believe is that it's just a first step, not even the first step. It's a zero step. It is a step for the national integrity, because you cannot have two states. Like if there's a state, it has to be one. Otherwise, there is no rule in that state. So it was a decision made in the national interest, and not. I am not saying that it is because that Kashmiri Pandits has to be resettled. When it comes to the Kashmiri Pandits resettlement, the government has no plan. They are just saying that go back to the place where you come from, and eventually you are outnumbered in that region. And over the time, we have seen that how killings have happened. So somewhere unknowingly that thing gets obfuscated, because you pin the blame on, okay, 370 अब तो नहीं है, तो वापस क्यों नहीं जाते?
True.
So the blame again comes back to the community. So what's the way forward for it?
No, I think first about the Kashmir Files. When the movie came out, everyone was ecstatic, and because Vivek had done a fantastic job with telling the truth. I think that no filmmaker in India has had those guts to do something like this.
Certainly, it was
not
not
about Kashmir also, but any kind of depiction of truth or the history of Hindu persecution in India, modern, ancient, medieval, whatever. There is no other filmmaker who has done that. So Vivek Agnihotri did a fantastic job, and I think वो जो हिंदी में कहावत है ना कि सात खून माफ. But now that we are a fair distance away from the event that the movie has released and things like that, I didn't want to speak about the movie at that time, take a critical lens or जबरदस्ती का intellectual बनने की जरूरत नहीं थी. But now that things are like what recently happened, what happened yesterday at the IFFI, there is a tendency among Hindus, because there's very little art that happens from a Hindu perspective, political art that is. It doesn't trickle down into the mainstream consciousness of India. So therefore, any little victory is celebrated as as some battle of Panipat. Okay, we saw that in Kantara. That you have, it's a good movie you had, but there was nothing, there was no reason for you not to take a critical view of the film. That but there is a problem with the narrative, that
the state is the savior.
So state versus community, that conflict, that is universal in the modern world. If you have such a take as Kantara has, then obviously that's so obvious that you have to point it out, no? That this is something which does not fit with the overall scheme. So while you may have shown one aspect very nicely, there are other things that you missed out on. So likewise, in Kashmir Files also, there are some bits which are very problematic, like this Article 370. It does not, that part of the movie was totally whack. That the person was holding that remove Article 370. At that time, Kashmiri Hindu community had no consciousness of Article 370 only, like the rest of India. It was a slogan of a minor political party called BJP at that time, right? That 370 hatao aur desh bachao. This was just a slogan. No one even knew about it. It was in their manifesto. And then after 30 years, they acted on that promise and they removed 370. So now that has to be used somehow to show that, this was the problem. So I think that part of the film is definitely not accurate. And that has given the impression that now that Article 370 is removed, you can send them back. And that has aided with this obfuscation process where the government is sending people back, like the Congress government also used to do. They used to send these employees on packages and give them whatever incentives, and then they get shot at and some of them return. So this drama has been going on forever, ever since the first that 1990 event took place. This drama has been going on forever, and the government of India has no vision, no solution for it, and therefore they keep doing these things.
Right. So, what is the way forward? Like,
no, the way forward is for the government to first acknowledge that there was a genocide. It's a 600-year long history of genocide. It's not just in the modern period or in 1990. You can't treat that as an isolated event. Some people say that, okay, oh, there were just 200, 300 people, Hindus killed. But you look at it in its entirety, an entire community has been wiped out over centuries, and the demographics have been reversed. So if you look at that broad view, take a broad view of history, then it is obviously a case of very, very direct genocide, cultural genocide, ethnocide, all that has taken place. And so the recognition of that is extremely important. And once the government recognizes that, then that point of view should be represented in international forums also. And we have to find ways in which whatever the government has to do, I mean, to make a case in the United Nations or to convince its allies, geopolitical allies, that we need to do this, we need to send Hindus back, we need to alter the demographics. So whatever the strategy is, but the strategy can only be worked out if the baseline truth is established, which is that Hindus were driven out because they were Hindus, because they were idol worshippers, they were polytheists, whatever name you want to give it, and because they refused to submit to Islam. That is extremely important. You were driven out because you were given three choices: Raliv, Chaliv, Galiv. Convert, leave, or die. So you refused to convert, and you didn't want to die, so you left.
well, the acknowledgement, the possibility of having such an acknowledgement is quite less given what our NSA said yesterday with respect to the religion, where he mentioned it.
Of course, they are in denial because they don't want to take a stand, and whether it is the NSA, whether it is the topmost ministers of the cabinet, whether it is the Prime Minister himself, all of them have been party to this obfuscation, and they continue to do it. And people, like the psychology of a defeated community is in how you interpret events. So when Hindus come face to face with such statements from their chosen leaders, from their elected leaders, some would say anointed leaders, in that case, how do you reconcile with this contradiction that comes from them? You either face the truth and say that, okay, this is not correct, this he shouldn't have said that, and find ways to influence the polity and build institutions or whatever we were talking about, or you say something like, no, actually they are playing Chanakya's game. You tell me which is the easier way out. You can always rationalize and say that, oh, these guys are doing this because they are playing the game of the left, because they say one thing, do another. What do another? What have they done? They're saying what they're doing what they're saying, and you are just watching for the last 70 years, including the last 8 years, and nothing has changed. So you're right, there is very little hope of anything changing in the near future, but we need to be optimistic.
So what is the lesson for the rest of the Hindus when we come from this Kashmiri Pandit episode? Like for the last 30 years, what has happened with them?
No, the biggest
similar thing is being repeated in West Bengal, or say in pockets of Kerala, or in Adi.
Yes, I think the biggest learning from the Kashmiri Hindu episode for any other Hindu is that if something like that happens to you, no one will stand with you, including your fellow brethren, including the Indian state. No one is going to acknowledge what happened to you, and you will be left on your own. You have no institutions, you have no...
That's quite a pessimistic way.
No, that is the truth. Whether it is pessimistic, realistic, optimistic, it doesn't matter. That is the truth. It is not, no one is going to stand with you. And we have seen that. What happened to the Hindu families from Kairana who had to leave from their places? The media went on overdrive denying that fact. The government acted as if nothing had happened. What happened to the Bengali Hindus? 80,000 Hindus had to run overnight to Assam after the West Bengal elections. What happened to those 80,000 Hindus? Are they in the news? Does anyone care what happened to them? What happened to Anurag Poddar? What happened to this There's
Kanhaiya Lal.
Kanhaiya Lal. What happened to this the other fellow who got beheaded?
That's we don't even remember the name.
Yeah,
So
we don't even remember the names. So these are, I mean, what happened to Paresh Mehta? These are names that people don't have even forgotten. These are individual cases, but even if it happens to the whole community also, no one is going to care. No one is going to remember. And then after a few years, like some Kashmiri Pandit intellectuals, they will come out and say that, oh, we were always living in harmony and there was no problem. Let us forget about the past and let's
have a restart again.
Yeah. So I think that's
Thank you, viewers, for joining us. There were some issues with our live, so apologies for that. We'll be doing our live sessions once we figure it out. So thank you for joining us.